Once you are self-aware, you must make a change.
Welcome to the Millionaire Woman Show, where we'll be discussing leadership, business, human potential, inspiring you to live rich from the inside out. Unlock your creativity, stretch out of your comfort zone, break through your barriers, take inspired action, and achieve epic results. Now here's your host, 3-time best-selling author, speaker, and certified executive coach, Debra Kasowski.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Millionaire Woman Show. And if it's your first time here, we're grateful that you've dropped on in. And we're going to share with you principles of life, leadership, and business. And today, our whole focus is talking with our special guest, Candace McKim. She's an intuitive teacher, coach, author, TEDx speaker, and founder of the Intuitive Coaching Academy online training. Candace spent decades combining her social work background with yoga, chakra therapy in the form of intuitive teachings. Candace's wise and fun-loving approach guides women to courageously connect to their purpose through their intuition to up-level heart-centered businesses. And Candace's training and coaching strategies support purpose-driven women to make an impact and attract the wealth and recognition they desire by following intuitive wisdom. Candace teaches not only on intuition, but on women and worth, wellness, and wealth and wellness. And she also has here, and I'm going to put it in the show notes, that you can enjoy a free meditation on the magic of your intuition. And I'll have that in the show notes for you. But I'm really excited. Actually, Candace and I shared a stage for Blue Talks. And we both have a Blue Talk, and we're both TEDx speakers. So it's nice to have this kindred spirit who knows what it's all about. So welcome to the show, Candace. It's so exciting to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. I am super excited to be here, Debra, and good to see you again.
It's wonderful to have you. And you know what, when I was watching your bio and reading your bio and thinking of our experience together, I was thinking, I really want to talk about intuition with you, because intuition, I think when we don't trust ourselves or that inner wisdom within us, that's where we feel that lack of clarity. That's where we feel that confusion inside. So I want you just to start sharing with us a little bit of how you chose to take the path of being an intuitive teacher.
Okay, well, it was very intuitively guided. But I think a lot of people think intuition is nonsense and that we don't actually have an intuition. And I just believe that that is untrue, that it's just another one of our senses, the same as touch, taste, sight, smell, sound. We have intuition. And as I said, like, my intuition just guided me on my path through my whole life. You know, when you get here and you look back, and my book is called Intuition is a Choice, because sometimes we follow our intuition and then sometimes we don't. But I believe our intuition is our superpower, and that when we can really follow our intuitive guidance, then we're opening up to opportunities and possibilities that are there for us, but that we don't always take advantage of, that we often look outside of ourselves to get our answers, right? It's like that call a friend, right? I don't know about you, but I have that friend and that, or my sister that I always call. And it's like, how can I make these decisions on my own? And what is my intuition really telling me? And often I know which friend to call because I'll get the answer that I want to hear, right?
Yeah. That's so true, because we seek out, even when we, it's like when I'm thinking about the cars, people will think of buying a car and then they see them all over the road. Or, we, like you said, you phone the people that you want a certain answer from versus the person who tells you the answer you might not want to hear.
Yeah. So we quite often look outside of ourselves. And that's what we've been taught, right? Is to, to follow what society thinks, or to look outside of ourselves without looking within. But then we choose the person that will give us the answers that we want. So then we already have that answer within us.
Yeah.
So we know that we can make our own decisions from that. And like I said, my intuition has really guided me along the path. You said that my background is, I have a degree in social work. And then as I was intuitively guided, When I look back, my parents were self-employed parents, and they had 3 teenagers, and they were my mom was stressed out, and they were wanting to build their business, and they were very successful and doing really well. But my mom was getting burnt out, and she went to the doctor, and the doctor prescribed Valium to her. And so I was 13 years old, and my mom and dad decided to take our entire family to learn how to meditate. And, it wasn't that they were hippies, it was learning how to cope with the stress of being an entrepreneur and entrepreneurs. And so our whole family learned how to meditate. And then I became a social worker. I became a vegetarian. So I was always guided on this path to really follow my intuitive guidance. And then when I was working as a social worker, I remember saying to some friends of mine that, I wish I could counsel people who don't need counseling. And they would laugh and say, what is that? Like, what do you mean by that? And then as the years went on, then I realized, oh, that's actually what coaching is. And that at the time there wasn't life coaching and business coaching and intuitive coaching. There was just counseling. And for the rest of us who needed that support, it wasn't available to us. And so then I became a yoga therapist and a chakra therapist, and really married together talk therapy with body, mind, spirit, and then following our intuitive guidance, because that's where the magic is. That's where the opportunities are. And it can be our superpower, our intuition.
So what is one of the first things that you do when you work with someone to help develop that superpower? Because I know people listening or people watching our YouTube video here are thinking to themselves, I did trust myself at one time. How do I, first of all, and maybe some are still learning to trust. So to learn to trust, or to rebuild that trust in myself when there might have been a decision I didn't follow through on, and now I feel like I betrayed myself and kicking myself that I should have done something. How would you help them get started in that process?
Well, I believe that when we follow our intuitive guidance, that we will get on our purpose. And so what I think you're talking about is then when it feels like we're not on our purpose. And I don't believe that we're ever off our purpose. It's just that sometimes we might need to be re-guided and brought back to our purpose. And I don't believe that that those things that we deem as failures or ever mistakes, they're growing experiences. They're an opportunity for us to grow and to learn and to expand and to maybe pivot. So an example of that would be, I was a yoga therapist, and then I had a studio, and I went and did some training, and I got really clear that my purpose was to help women who had been violated. And so the second I made that decision, it showed up in my clientele. All summer long, I was at a retreat in June, and by August, it was full on. That's all my clientele was. I was being invited to events to speak at, and events to do chakra balancing and to do this kind of work. And then it was in September, and my husband and I were sitting on the deck, and I told him what happened, that I made this decision. And then he said, "Is that what you really want?" And I sat there for a moment, and I said, no, I didn't want to bring that energy back into my house, because my background was a social worker, and I left it because I didn't want to bring that energy into my household. Right. And so it was a very clear, conscious decision to not do it anymore. But I knew it was my purpose, right?
Yeah.
And so the second I made that decision to stop, it stopped again. Like it started as fast as it stopped. And then a year and 4 months later, an email came across my desk, and it was part of the organization that I'd done this training with. And they were doing a global Save a challenge to raise $20,000. They wanted all the participants to raise $20,000 for victims of sex trafficking in India.
Right.
I knew instantly I needed to do it. Instantly. I got a really clear intuitive hit. I needed to do it. And so I did. I stepped into it, and I raised the money very quickly. And as a result, it helped. So I was still back on my purpose, right? And I was back into this purpose, but it looked a different way, and it was making more of an impact rather than one-on-one. It was making a bigger impact.
Yeah. So, for people who are new to meditation or new to just sitting in silence, for one, I think our world's so busy that we don't even sit still enough without turning on a radio or a television, to have that background noise constantly, or the white noise that we have. what are people looking for? Are they listening for words? Are they when, when you get that intuitive hit, or is it something that they journal on paper? Do you explain a little bit about how people can tell if it's their intuition, that wisdom, that inner knowing?
Yeah, so all of those reasons, or all of those ways. The first way I teach intuition is that there's no separation between body, mind, spirit. So there will always be a physical reaction whenever you get an intuitive hit. So they call it a gut instinct, right? And it's because, like, that saying came from the truth around that we actually have a physical response. Some people get it in the gut. Some people get it in their chest. It might feel like a butterfly in their chest, or it might feel a little bit of tension. The same with the gut instinct. It feels almost like a contraction in the body. You might get it in the shoulders or the neck. For me personally, I get like a message going across my forehead, and it's usually only about 3 words. It's not a big, awakening moment or a big,
Right,
message
it's not
that
a
comes through.
thunderclap.
Yeah. And I used to, when I first was doing intuitive coaching, and I would try to make the message I got sound better. And my clients would just nod and go, yeah. But then when I said it exactly the way it came, then they got it. They go, oh yeah, that's the message. But as an intuitive coach, I bring in my own intuition, but I also help the client connect to their intuition, because we all have our own inner knowing, right? We all have our own answers within us.
Yeah.
And so it's about helping the client connect to their intuitive guidance. But yeah, there is no separation between the body, mind, and spirit.
Right. So they'll feel a physical reaction. They may have some words.
Yeah. Yeah. So like for you, do you know how you get your intuitive hit? Like some people, like I said, get it in the gut, get in the chest, the shoulders, the neck. I get itchy nose, itchy ringing in my ears.
Oh, see, I wouldn't even think of those subtle things to pay attention to.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I.
So do you know how you're getting?
But I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to have to pay more attention to the, sometimes it could be the scratching of the nose or something. I wouldn't have even thought of that as a intuitive hit.
And that's one of the things I teach in my training is for my students to start making a dictionary of noticing. And like, I'll rub my forehead or scratch the top of my head, like, so going to the chakras. And it's just that knowing that you have, right? It's different than thinking something, but it's like when you don't follow your intuition, you go, oh, I knew that was going to happen. Right. And it's like that. Oh, I knew it. Like the other day, it wasn't very long ago, and I actually locked my husband's keys in the truck. And so I had the keys, and I said, where do you want me to put these keys? Because we're doing a vehicle exchange kind of thing.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, we'll just set them inside the truck. And I went to close the door, and I went, I don't think I should shut this door. I didn't lock it, but I don't know. Like, I don't think I should shut this door. But I didn't want to second guess my husband. I didn't want to have to call him back and say, I don't think I should put the keys in here. Like, what if the direct locks, or, I didn't want to do all that. So I just did what he suggested I do. And yeah, sure enough, the keys got locked in the truck. And then he's like, yeah, frustrated. But it was afterwards, I'm like, oh, I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you share with us, a client that you've worked with from moving through the steps that you take someone through and some of the results? Like, I know patient confidentiality or client confidentiality, not to divulge any, identifying factors, but I would be really curious of how you help people develop that part of that inner knowing. Because I know when people have had different types of backgrounds, or, like that violation that you talked about. And violation can come in many forms. And, it could be as subtle as, reading a journal, or, whatever someone takes as a violation too. So I'm curious, as one of your clients, if you can share an example.
Yeah, like you were saying at the beginning, like how when you often when people have been violated, then they no longer trust their intuition,
Mhm.
right? It's like, how do I how do I trust this when it let me down? And
Yes.
really it's about knowing that all our experiences, even horrific experiences that we wouldn't wish on our worst nightmare, that there is growth and there is purpose to it for us.
Mhm.
And so working with my client to see the gems, if you will, that from that experience. And like if I work with a woman who who's gone through a divorce and a separation and divorce, and quite often I'll say to them, well, what did you get from that relationship? And the first thing people say is, well, I got my children out of it. And I'm like, no, what did you get deeper? Where did you learn? Where did you grow? Like from my own first marriage, I knew from having that marriage, I became the woman who could be married to my present husband. And we're just celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary, as we were talking before the call. And I wouldn't be the person that would be married to him for 25 years if I hadn't gone through that first relationship. And so it's about helping my clients get back onto going through their experiences, seeing the gems within them, and seeing where they did trust their intuition. You know, a lot of people, they might be walking down the aisle and they get an intuitive hit that they shouldn't get married, right? And they still do. And so validating that they did get the intuitive hit, but they're on their soul's journey. Their soul wanted them to go through this experience.
Mhm.
And what did they learn from this experience? How did they grow? How did they evolve? How has it led them to their purpose? Because as horrific as some of our experiences are, they lead us to where we're supposed to share our messages in the world and to develop and create businesses and to really share that with the world.
I love how you started talking, you know, how it's leading us to our soul's purpose, but somewhere in there, the ego tries to get in the way. I think when I think about, you know, there's a book I read recently that I've shared a few times on What My Soul Told Me by Richard Barrett. And it talks about how the ego eventually starts serving the soul because it's there to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's interesting how when we think about intuitiveness, you know, I think when it comes to trusting yourself to make a decision, it's also about, you know, when we make a decision, it's better than no decision. Because often, you know, people will say, well, no decision is a decision, but not necessarily. You can sit in a place of duality of going back and forth before you're completely sure to make that firm decision that you want to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there are two things that came up when you were talking about that is, fear, our ego is wanting to keep us safe, right? Mm-hmm. Is our ego wants to protect us and keep us playing small. And our intuition wants us, I believe our intuition is our soul speaking to us. So what does your soul want for you? Your soul wants you to shine. Your soul has a message that wants you to share with the world to help other people, to be of service. And so just recognizing it, which is why we hire intuitive coaches, or why we hire any coach, right? Is to keep getting the support to move through the fear. And it's our society that has wanted us to play small, do it in society's way. And, you know, whenever I'm following my intuition and my friends and the people in my life question what I'm doing and they don't know what I'm doing, it reminds me, it's almost evidence that I'm actually following my intuition because they don't get what I'm doing, right? They don't get the decisions I'm making. So it's like this, here's the evidence that I'm actually following what my soul wants to do because people aren't getting me. And
I love that
perspective. I do think
that happened myself in my life too. You know, where your family members
where people don't.
You.
Yeah. They wonder, why did you make this decision? And are you nuts? Like even so I had a yoga studio. I had had it for 17 years. It was super successful. I raised the money for victims of sex trafficking in India. So I was going to go to India and for 6 weeks. And a month before or 6 weeks before I left, I got a really clear intuitive hit to sell the yoga studio. And nobody knew why. Even my husband goes, what are you doing? You're only going for 5 or 6 weeks. Like, what are you going to do when you come home? It's where I taught yoga. I had workshops. I saw clients. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I need to do it. And 2 days before I left to go to India, I handed over the keys to the studio. And so I went to India. I came back and I didn't know what I was going to do. And well, first of all, it took me a few months to heal. And I just sat there and I was in this flux between angry and hopelessness from what I had seen over there. And I just kept going back and forth. And I had done a spiritual journey after going to the organizations that we were supporting. Then I did a spiritual pilgrimage. So it took me a couple months to just have a spiritual shift. I called it wallowing.
Yeah. Well,
my friend said, you're shifting.
It would have been challenging to move from where you've seen some of the worst case scenarios to moving back into the yoga and calming everyone and, and feeling that own trigger within yourself.
Yeah. And so then what happened though is when it opened up time and space, because I had already been creating my deck of oracle cards. When I taught yoga, I would get into intuition as to what the yoga postures meant on a spiritual level.
Right.
And so it was during then that time, I didn't know what I was doing with myself. So I pulled out my deck and I started writing out, like creating the deck fully. Like I'd been taking notes of all the yoga postures of what they meant spiritually. Now I started creating the deck. And at the same time, my daughter was at university in Calgary in an art school. And so she started doing the artwork for me. And as I was creating the deck of cards, then I knew I had a book. And so within a year and a half, I had the book and cards out. And then I've been traveling, teaching workshops and started speaking and did the TEDx talk. So, I got to then start to speak about intuition on a much bigger scale than I had been in my yoga studio.
That's
so it's
fascinating how it led you.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you tell someone who is frustrated that their path is not going the way they expected? They have these events that show up in their life that seem to be working out, seem to be leading them on the path, yet they're not getting the results that they want. What would you tell them?
I would start to look at their mindset and start to take a look at what we believe creates our thoughts, creates our feelings, create our actions or inactions, create our results. And then the results keep reinforcing our beliefs. So really checking in with their mindset. Yeah. And as we go into mindset, that's when we start to get to truth with a capital T. And when we go into that, when we go into our genius, if you will, that's when the intuition comes. That's when the opportunity starts to come and our intuition starts to open up to receiving the amazing opportunities, right? Like some people's lives just feel so frustrating and so, like in such a place of lack where you see other people's and it just seems so abundant and possibilities or getting opportunities keep coming to them. And it's because they're in that flow, right? They're back in that flow.
Yeah. And that flow is so important too, because it creates a momentum, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, the inaction or action is going to lead toward the result, but it all comes back to the mindset. And also, it's also what's influencing that mindset. So when you think about, when people are talking about television and podcasts and books, how does that, when we seek knowledge from these resources, how does that impact intuition?
Oh, I think all of that influences us, right? And it's about, and even our friend group, right? Our friends and who we spend our time with and who we associate with. Like, are they feeding our soul or are they not, right? And I think that's a really important part. And for my work too is, I like to keep moving myself back into the feminine energy. Like, how do I build my business in the feminine energy as opposed into the masculine energy? So I think as what you're saying is, as we're exposed to books and, how much of it have we been gaslighted, if you will, our entire lives, that we need to do it in the masculine energy,
Mhm.
as opposed to allowing and flowing and doing it intuitively, so that we're doing it in our own creative way, which would be the feminine energy.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that even the whole pandemic has made all of us move more into our feminine energy, right? Like businesses everywhere have had to get way more creative. That's feminine energy. You know,
Mhm.
we had to homeschool our children, so we're bringing them in. You know, we've all had to really move, and you can just see the value of the feminine energy with what we've gone through in the last year. And so how do we shift that into in using that momentum to keep moving ourselves forward?
Yeah.
And a lot of my clients are in corporate, but they want to go into their own businesses, right? They want to take that step back. And I think we're going to see a bigger shift of that people have been looking at the way their lives have been, and how do we shift it more into the feminine energy of more joy and pleasure and beauty and flow, and still make money and grow businesses in that energy.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that, for people who, because we have men and women listening to the show and may not totally understand the masculine and the feminine energy. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so we all possess both masculine and feminine energy, but we think of masculine energy, and we need both, right? We need to have both. But I see women, or people who identify as women, being more in their feminine energy. So maybe majoring in the feminine energy and minoring in the masculine. And then people who identify as masculine, or men, would maybe major in the masculine energy and minor in the feminine energy. And so masculine energy we see as a little bit more goal oriented, a little bit more task oriented, lists and doing it that way, where the feminine energy is a little bit more emotional. It's more going into the flow and allowing things to happen. An example would be right from when I started my studio, like 20 years ago. I would always say, I do business like a woman. And what that meant was, I didn't have a lot of rules and a lot of restrictions, and there was more of a flow to it and a little bit more of an allowing to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting because I was thinking about intuition and when it has struck me when something was intuitively guided. And I remember being part of a job interview process, and there was no second interview, but suddenly there was a second interview. And I had learned that someone had said that they wished that they had been part of the process and had voiced this. So now suddenly there was a second interview. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, if you're needing to do this, it just didn't feel right to me for the reason behind it. So I actually had withdrawn my interview and my resume. And I said, you've already made your decision. I don't need to continue on with this process to appease others, just to be a part of the process. And the person had called me up, and she was just shocked. And she just started off with, well, we have a really strong candidate that just came in. And I'm like, well, you've already made your decision. Like, don't even take, like, this is a waste of my time. And so I pulled back and, they hired that candidate, but, she wanted to talk further. And I said, you know what, I want to do a 360 with you. And I shared my thoughts about, being a manager, the type of manager that walks around, that gets to know their people, to share with them. And that was not something that I witnessed. And that was what I had, offered as a recommendation as well. And it was interesting because I thought, I thought it fell on deaf ears. And it was about 8 months later, we were in a meeting, and this same person said, today I'm going to do something that I fear. I'm going to walk amongst the people. And it was so fascinating to me. So as we're talking here with you, Candace, that came up to me as that was a form of intuition that I didn't know where it came from, but I was like, you know what? This is what she needs to hear from me at this moment. And she did do it and was surprised at how it wasn't such a fearful thing to do. And here in my head, I thought all leaders should know to do this, right? Because that was something that I did as a leader. Right. And I realized that all leaders do not think that way, but that was my intuitive hit. And I think that one hit me in the gut.
Yeah. And even your intuition saying that they've already made a decision.
Yeah.
Right? You already intuitively knew that this second interview is a waste of my time, because I know you knew intuitively they'd already made a decision.
Yeah. And I had no problem with their decision. I was just like, why do this? Why move through the motions? Because you never thought to include these people in the interview process panel to begin with. I just felt that the purpose and the rationale behind it was not taking up people's time appropriately. So I was like, yeah, no, you can keep it. So, yeah. So I think it's about also tracking when we have those intuitive hits, like you said, like to pay attention when words come to you, or, people, I met with someone today, they talked about recognizing numbers that show up for them, or, those kind of things. Or they, actually, she was sharing with me that, she has this wakes up at 3 a.m. and it's like, okay, are you getting up? And she's like, really? Get up now? It's 3 o'clock in the morning. And I started laughing. I said, I think you need to listen to that, because it's probably when all your ideas are going to flow out. When you
that's exactly how my Intuitive Coaching Academy training came about. Is I was in bed asleep and I heard this loud bang. And I woke up my husband and said, there's somebody in the house. And we live in a 2-story. I said, there's somebody in the house. And I shook him awake. And we went downstairs and we walked around the main floor and we didn't see anything or anybody. So we went back to bed, and like most men, he fell back to sleep like this.
Yeah.
And I was laying there and I literally felt like I was getting shooken awake. Like felt like somebody was pushing on me.
Yeah.
And so I just rolled over and I got up and I grabbed my computer and I went into our family room and I sat down and I wrote out the entire 6-month curriculum that night.
Wow.
And I just like, okay. And so then I sent it out to my assistant. I said, let's get this going. Let's get this on my website. And then I went to Mexico to teach a retreat. I came home and a week later, COVID hit. And I was like, okay, I guess, when we go into fear, how do we react? And so many people during COVID, they took a step back, right? They retreated, right? You go into fight, flight, fear, and they took that step back. And I did as well. And when I took that step back, then I believe, our higher power or source or whoever stepped in. And one of my past students emailed me and said, hey, Candace, do you have any trainings coming up in the next little while? I'm going to be working from home now.
Yeah.
And I just went, yes, I do. And it filled up right away. And now it's just been going. And so, and so when we go into that fear, how do we take that step back? And then how do we lean into it, right? Like, how do we lean into it and going, okay, you know what? This is what needs to happen right now, is I need to lean into this. And I think what you're talking about is actually channeling, right? Like as coaches, that you're channeling the messages all the time for your clients.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I don't think people think of it that way, but it is a somewhat of a download, right? You have this wisdom that you possess, not just the training that you've taken, but that, I guess one of the things that the most subtle example I can use, Candace, is when I say hello to someone or ask how they're doing. If they pause even for a second, I'll be like, you hesitated there. Tell me more. And then all of a sudden you get this whole different story, And I think it's the simple things can lead us to pay. It's because we need to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like even at you doing podcast interviews, right? You're channeling the questions. Like I could see you channeling these questions to me, which led me in different directions, right?
Yeah.
And I know I channeled my book. Like I would, and that's how I wrote my book, is I would do free writing and I would sit there and meditate for 5 minutes. And then I just started writing. And I know, and sometimes I'll read it back and I'll go, holy cow, I
Where did
didn't
that
even know.
come from?
I didn't even know. Yeah, where'd that come from? That's good stuff. Because
Yeah.
it's, I don't, and I do think our society really does keep pushing us to play small and not to follow our intuitive guidance and, shut it down. And, it's that ego again that wants us to play small. But when we can step into the process, then you really can make the money that you want and the impact and doing what you love.
Well, one of the biggest things I think I've noticed, just even recently, I was just watching some people play some video games, and I thought, you always deny yourself of doing this, as an adult, and you used to do it as a kid, and they were having so much fun, this family member. And I thought, do you know when you deny yourself, and some people will say, oh, I just sacrifice, and I'm like, there's a point of sacrificing, but when you're truly denying yourself, others withhold themselves as well. And I watch it, like, oh no, if you won't do it, I'm not going to do it. Or if they're not interested in going to do this tonight, I'm not going to do it either. And it's like we either think, sometimes we think everybody has to conform, versus no, that's what brings him joy. Let them participate in that. And then it allows everybody else to say, hey, and I enjoy this. Want to come try to do this with me? And this is where you see that expansion versus that constriction of people denying themselves or sacrificing.
Yeah. And look how, like, I know you have both men and women on here, but look how much women have been told to play small, be little, like not take up too much room, not to take up too much space, don't speak too much. We have been told over and over again, and to be successful, we need to shut down our feelings and our emotions, which is our feelings and our emotions are what connect us to our intuition. I remember my mom, like we'd have pie and there wouldn't be enough. And so she would sacrifice. Right. And we were taught, like, we grew up learning that, oh, it's the mom's job to sacrifice. Where it's like, where did that come from? Let's shift that. Let's empower everybody.
And I'm glad we're talking about this, because I was having a conversation with someone and they were saying, well, don't settle. You never settled before. Why choose to settle now? And I forget what we were talking about, but it reminded me, about never settling. It is of that compromise, and people settle for less than they think that they can get, instead of dreaming bigger and feeling that they deserve more, versus playing small and saying, I should be just grateful for what I have. Why is it that I want more?
And again, I think it's that gaslighting that we have been taught, that we are supposed to be happy with the way things are and happy, but it's like, we know there's something more. Like, this is one of the questions I ask at every talk I do. Do you feel you're here for greatness? And 100% of the people raise their hand, that they know they're here for something more, which is what our soul wants for us, is to really show up and to be of service and to share our messages. And we've been told that you're supposed to be happy with the way things are. And that, yes, we do want to be grateful. We do want to go into gratitude for all of the abundance that we have and all of the privilege that we have. And yet we also know that there can be more. And me having more doesn't take it away from anybody else. Right. We can all have more. We can all really shine and go big and to expand ourselves out. We don't have to play small.
And that's a great reminder, Candace. I really appreciate that you said that, because when they raise their hand and they're all in unison saying, yeah, I know I'm made for more, I'm made for greatness. When you are made for greatness, there is no room to settle. There is no room to say, you know what, I'm going to dim my light just a little bit because I think that other person can shine brighter. It doesn't work that way. It's just about turning the switch up higher and illuminating others at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Or to make our, I was just on a coaching call with somebody and they've been told that they're too much. Like, she's been told her whole life that she's just too much. And it's like, no, how can you be too much? Right? Too much for whom? right?
Yeah.
And when you're full on, then you're right. It gives for everybody permission to be full on and shine that light as bright as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that as well, to be too much, or, and at the same time, when they say that, it feels like you're not enough. So you have this duality bouncing back and forth, because those people often are quite high achievers who are often told that they're too much. And then at the same time, I think I've, witnessed even in my own coaching clients, that they're putting in all this effort, but at the same time, they feel that they're not enough. And that's part of why they have that driver, that motivator to be more.
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, they're doing, I believe that what they're doing then is following what maybe society thinks, instead of doing it in their own way, or they're doing it in a way that maybe they've seen other people do it, instead of showing up fully, but really bringing yourself, your authenticity, your uniqueness, your niche out into the world. Like I've taught now, many people through the Intuitive Coaching Academy training. And the part that's unique is that we start the business training right from the beginning of the training, and everyone has their own niche. So yes, they'll all come out as intuitive coaches, but maybe they have a Reiki background, maybe they have a massage therapy background, maybe they have, a corporate background. So they're going to bring their niche out as a coach, and there will be people there for them to coach, because they're going to bring their uniqueness with it.
Yeah. And I like how you said earlier, once you make a decision, everything falls into place.
Yes.
Right. And just being trusted, guided, like that was a phenomenal thing to think, sell the yoga studio that was thriving, and knowing that, just trusting that that's what you needed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And when we make those kind of decisions, then resistance will come up, right? So sometimes it's like moving through that resistance, like, my clients weren't happy about it. My students weren't happy about it. And even the landlord, she said, well, I'll give you a free month's rent.
Yeah.
Like, then I had to check in with my body and go, I actually said it out loud. I said, I'm going to keep the studio. And I got a no. And my gut went like contracted. And then I'm like, I'm going to sell the studio. And it was like an expansion feeling. It was like, yes. And so it's trusting that, and then moving through the resistance of everybody else, and just going, no, this is the decision I know I need to make, and I'm going to keep following through with it.
Yeah. And I think that's the toughest part, is the resistance that shows up around you, and not understanding why they don't see what you see, and, have the feeling that you feel that everything's going to work out. And here's the thing, for everybody listening, everything works out exactly as it should, even when we don't understand it. But as we continue to move forward, we can see shifts all around us, and how things show up for exactly when you need them at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we start to second guess ourselves. And what if we're wrong?
Yeah.
Right? We don't want
No
to
one
make
wants to make a mistake,
but if we believe,
right? Yeah.
No. And if you believe, well, there are no mistakes, right? That it's all going to just be perfect then, or it's all going to work out the way it's supposed to, and I'm going to get the lessons that I need.
Yeah.
Then it's a little bit easier. But like I said, that's why we all have coaches.
Yeah.
So that we can move through that fear, move through that discomfort, and keep moving forward and following the intuitive guidance.
Yeah. So when someone feels really stuck, what would be the first thing that you would tell them to do? Like, I know with your mom and the burnout, meditation was the first thing that she was drawn to. But if you have someone who's stuck, who's not sure what to do or make a decision, what would be the first thing to do?
The first thing I would look at is what belief do they have around being stuck? And are they really stuck? Or what is the meaning that they're giving being stuck?
Yeah.
Right. And so then, like, what is the belief that is around that, and what limiting belief is holding them back? I like to call the limiting beliefs the drunk girl, right? And you don't, what do you do with the drunk girl, right? You put her in the back seat, you give her a cup of tea, and you strap her in. And
Yeah.
she'll be like in the back seat beaking off, you're going the wrong way, you're not doing this right, turn here, turn there. And you're like, you don't want the drunk girl driving the car, right?
Right.
And it's like, so, right. So how do you come back to what is your intuition telling you? How do you keep moving forward with it? And it's just about taking this first step. You don't have to see the whole path, right? Or, I look at it as if you're standing on one side of the river and you want to get to the other side of the river. So here's the vision is on the other side of the river, and you just need to step onto one lily pad. But you can't line up all the lily pads across the river, because as you go, they're going to move and they're going to sway. And so you just have to get on the first lily pad and then, navigate that first lily pad. And then when the second one shows up and is the right alignment, then you step onto it. And that just is honestly the way it just keeps going over and over. And, even then when you get to the other bank, then you're going to go through the process again once you get your vision onto the next bank, right? And I think it's really for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. And it's shutting down that inner critic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because sometimes that can be louder than the people around us.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And it's like, no, we don't want her driving the car. Let's put her in the back seat.
Yeah.
Give her a cup of tea. Hopefully she'll pass out.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully that will be the trick, right? Well, yeah. I feel like we're just getting started into this conversation, and we're actually near the end of the conversation. I would love to chat with you further. I have 2 questions left that I like to ask all my guests. What is one book that has had a significant impact in your life?
Well, my book.
Yeah,
Intuition is a choice. Yogini's Guide. Yogini's Guide to Intuition is a choice. Honestly, it was Brené Brown, Braving the Wilderness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what stood out for you?
I don't know if we have time for this story, but I was actually listening to her audiobook and I was walking. I was in a really big shift again in my business. I had a really good, successful coaching business going, but I just knew things needed to change. And I was walking a lot and walking. And I was listening to her book, and I was coming into this area. It was this big open, it was actually a runway is what it was, but it was all grass. And there was a pond on one side and then forest all around the runway. And I took the headphones off. And as I was walking through this field, I actually had an encounter with a bear. And and so the bear came out of the bush, and I ran. The part of my brain was going, stop running. So I turned around and started waving my arms and yelling, and she went up on her hind legs. And as she was doing that, I leaned towards her. I was on my tippy toes, and I remember leaning towards her and the 2 different parts of my brain, and I was yelling and waving my arms. And then she went down and then ran across. And so it was just this whole metaphor of braving the wilderness and lean into your fear, and so many messages and so much that came through that. And I continue to listen to the book over and over again.
That is so powerful. If that's not facing your fear, I don't know what is. That's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. Wow.
You're welcome.
Wow. I could just feel it in my whole body, just facing that and thinking, holy man, I don't know, like it would just be a total intuition taking over.
Yeah. And it was really pivotal. Like it started an avalanche of changes. It was 3 years ago, just a couple of weeks ago was the anniversary of it. So it was 3 years ago. And it's been just an avalanche of changes in my life, and following that guidance, like following it.
Yeah.
Without,
incredible.
I'm not gonna say without fear, with fear, but like doing it anyway, like leaning into it.
Yeah. That's a perfect metaphor. What does it mean to you to live rich from the inside out?
Ooh, good question. Living rich to me is definitely living on purpose And the purpose feels like flow. It feels easy. It's graceful. And it just feels like opportunities come and you follow them and you meet amazing people and you know, send out the right email. Just like living into that flow just feels really rich and really powerful for me.
Yeah.
Like I love when I get into it. And then when I come out, it's like, oh, how do I get back? Right. It's like, and then how do I bringing myself back into it?
Yeah, exactly. So how can people stay in touch with you?
So I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, all as Candace McKim, CandaceMcKim, as well as my website, CandaceMcKim.com, has all of my trainings. It has free yoga classes and meditations, and as well as the gift that you have the link to that you're going to share.
Yes, the magic of intuition. So we'll have that in the show notes. Everything will be available. You just click on the show notes in the YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us, go check out the YouTube channel. You can see us in person and not just on audio. So thank you so much for joining us today. Candace McKim is our special guest here on the Millionaire Woman Show. So many nuggets to take away, always working on refining and redefining that intuitive process, and to pay attention, sit in silence, maybe take up meditation, go check out some of her videos, and maybe you'll even try out some yoga as well. But it's about exploring. And one of the biggest things, Candace, I think what we discussed is probably abundance, but also that expansiveness when you step into your greatness, how much we expand and allow others to expand in who they are.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk to you tonight.
Thank you so much. And everyone, you can pop over to my website at www.debrakasowski.com, where right now you can get your 3-part video course on making habits stick, discover where those derailers are taking you off course, and rebuild that focus and consistency so you can build those dreams of yours. Now, if you're interested in coaching, please DM me and go on to the contact page and send me a message about what you're up to, and we'll set up a complimentary discovery session for you. As Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you wish to see in the world. And on behalf of Candace and myself, go out and have a great day.